In this week's Realty Rant, Victoria McGuire from Cooperative Real Estate is back, and today she has brought Jim Hollaway from Hillsborough Title as her guest. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. We're diving into I think a pretty fascinating topic when you talk about contracts, only because too I think a lot of people have questions, especially with maybe buying and selling in different states across the country. We have a lot of snowbirds, but why is it important to know about contracts and kind of the contingencies that we're going to talk about this morning?
Well, because you want to be informed to be able to protect yourself and to know what you're getting into. A lot of people these days, I find, just blindly sign these contracts. They don't really read them. They don't know what they're signing. And that's why it's so important to be in the hands of a good real estate agent and that has a good team around them so that they're going to be able to use those protections.
Protections for both the buyer and the seller, too, when it comes to the contract, right? Because there are differences.
Sure. But contracts are governed by state law, so what may be in a contract in Pennsylvania may not be in a contract in Florida.
Okay, so in looking at the contracts, the most common contracts here in Florida, what do you think it is important for buyers and sellers to know? Well,
the most common contract that we're using right now that I see in our offices is the FAR Bar as is. It's a contract promulgated by the Florida Bar and the Florida Association of Realtors, and it's an as is contract.
As is meaning what?
Meaning, here it is, take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going to make
Buying
repairs.
the property as it sits that day. It does have to be maintained in that condition until the closing by the seller, but the seller's not required to do anything to it.
Okay, well, let's talk about, I guess, the seller first. Are there any contingencies where they can come back and say, never mind, I don't want to sell anymore?
You know, I get asked this question often, and it's kind of a seller's remorse. They sign the contract and they decide, wait a minute, I don't want to move after all. I love this house. I've raised my kids in this house. Unfortunately, there's not a contingency for the seller to change their mind and decide they want to keep the house.
And I even asked you if there's a death in the family or something happens. I mean,
you can certainly ask the buyer if you can terminate.
Explain your situation.
But there's nothing in the contract
legally
to give you the basis to terminate.
Okay, now what about the buyer then? Is there anything that they can, if they find out something later, is there contingencies there?
There's actually two built-in contingencies to the as-is contract. They have the right to do an inspection. They have a certain period of time that's agreed upon to do those inspections. They can back out if they're not satisfied with that inspection.
I mean, that's it. No questions asked if there's...
And the other contingency would be their financing. If their loan is not able to be approved, then they do have the right and the freedom to back away from that contract.
Back to the home inspection, if it's just a small, I mean, let's say there's something, and I don't know if hypothetically, it's just a $500 thing that needs to be fixed. Can they say, nope, I don't even want to do that? Under
the as-is contract, the buyer can terminate at the buyer's sole discretion. We do have some appellate court opinion that it has to be in good faith. There's an implicit good faith in the contract, but if they decide they don't like the color of the paint, they don't want this or that, they can terminate at their sole discretion.
Wow, all right. Well, as we kind of wrap up, what is your take home? What do you think is I'll let you both kind of get the last say here. What's the most important thing, do you think, for people watching this morning to know?
I think to read and understand the contract and ask questions. There are parts of the contract, the financing contingency, for instance, is fairly complicated. And don't be afraid to ask. There are no stupid questions, right?
Yep. I love that. There are no stupid questions.
No stupid
and you need a good team.
Yes.
So thank you both so much for being here this morning. We learned a lot this morning, and we look forward to having you guys back next week.
Thank you.
And again, for more info, there is their website, their phone number as well, but realtyrant.com.